It wasn't loud, no explosion, no dramatic exit. Just a quiet, deliberate sound, like a case file snapping shut in an empty room. Final, clean, decided. You felt it, maybe not all at once. Maybe it crept in slowly. But something shifted inside you. And the strange part, they felt it too. They can sense something changing, even if they don't understand what it is. Your responses are shorter. Your eyes don't linger the same way. Your silence feels different. This isn't anger. Anger is noisy. Anger explains itself. What changed in you is quieter than that. It's colder, more precise. For years you were collecting evidence. Every inconsistency, every subtle betrayal, every moment you swallowed your reaction just to keep the peace. You told yourself it was nothing. You gave it time. You gave them grace. But somewhere along the way, the file filled up. And when it closed completely. Now you move differently. Speak differently. Think differently. What did you see that made you stop explaining? What did you realize that made you stop reacting? Whatever it was, this version of you is harder to access. And that's not an accident. You were never naive. That's the part they misunderstood. They mistook your silence for blindness, your patience for weakness, your restraint for ignorance. But you saw everything. The backhanded compliments disguised as jokes, the subtle shift in tone when you succeeded, the way loyalty bent when it became inconvenient. None of it escaped you. You just didn't react immediately. You gave chances. Not because you didn't notice, but because you wanted to be certain. You replayed conversations in your head, not out of insecurity, but analysis. You paid attention to patterns. What they said versus what they did. How they treated you when others were watching compared to when no one was around. And the patterns were consistent. You stayed silent longer than most people could. You absorbed more than you should have. Not to be a martyr, but to be accurate. Because the strongest people don't explode at the first offense. They observe, they measure, they confirm. This wasn't impulsive. It was documented internally, every dismissive glance, every broken promise. Every moment you felt the subtle sting of being underestimated. You logged it without announcing it. You adjusted without warning them. You watched long enough to remove doubt. They thought you were passive, you were collecting data. That's why when the shift finally happened, it wasn't emotional, it was informed. You didn't wake up one day and decide to detach. You concluded. It wasn't a fight. There was no slammed door, no raised voice. No dramatic ending that everyone could point to and say, that's when it happened. It was smaller than that. Maybe it was a look, the kind that revealed what words were trying to hide. Maybe it was the way they repeated the same behavior after promising they wouldn't. Maybe it was the casual dismissal of something that mattered deeply to you. On the surface, it seemed minor, but to you, it wasn't isolated. It was confirmation. In that moment, something aligned internally. Every stored memory, every quiet observation, every ignored instinct clicked into place. The case file didn't grow thicker. It became complete. And completion feels different than anger. Anger wants to argue. Completion doesn't. You realize there was nothing left to clarify, nothing left to explain, nothing left to negotiate. You weren't confused anymore, and that clarity removed the last thread of emotional attachment. Most people go back at this point. They second guess. They soften. They convince themselves it wasn't that serious. You didn't. Instead of trying one more time to be understood, you shifted your focus. You started understanding. You understood the pattern. You understood the dynamic. You understood your own threshold. And once you truly see something, you can't unsee it. That was the moment it changed, not loudly, but permanently. They think you're just going through something, a mood, a rough patch, a temporary shift in energy. They assume you'll cool off like you always have, that eventually you'll circle back, soften your tone, reopen the door. They're waiting for the familiar version of you to return, the one who explains, forgives, absorbs. They expect the cycle, because in their mind, this is just another emotional spike, another reaction that will fade with time. But this time is different. They are operating from habit. You're operating from awareness. That's the asymmetry. They believe they understand the pattern because they've seen you tolerate before. What they don't realize is that the tolerance wasn't weakness, it was evaluation. And now the evaluation is complete. They can feel something changing. The air around you is different. Your responses are measured. Your presence doesn't lean toward them the way it used to. But they misread it. They think it's distance born from frustration. It's not. It's recalibration. They are speaking to the old version of you, the one who negotiated respect, the one who tried to maintain harmony at personal cost. That version no longer exists, and this isn't your final form. What's unsettling for them isn't your silence. It's the realization that it might not break, that this shift might not reverse. For the first time, they're not sure they can predict you, and that uncertainty, it's power. The real battle was never with them. It was with yourself. Long after the conversations ended, the trial began. Quiet, internal, relentless. You sat with your thoughts like a defendant and a judge at the same time. You questioned your judgment. Maybe you were too sensitive. Maybe you expected too much. Maybe you misread the situation. You replayed memories from different angles, searching for evidence that would disprove your disappointment. You tried to reconstruct their intentions in a way that made them innocent. Empathy argued loudly in their defense. They didn't mean it. They're just flawed. You know how they are. But logic kept presenting exhibits, battles, repetition, consistency. This wasn't about one moment. It was about the accumulation. And accumulation doesn't lie. You doubted your instincts because honoring them would require action. And action meant change. Change meant distance. Distance meant losing what was familiar. Even if what was familiar was slowly eroding you, that was the hardest part. Choosing between comfort and clarity. Inside your mind, emotions fought for reconciliation. Boundaries demanded accountability. One side wanted to preserve connection. The other wanted to preserve you. And eventually, the noise settled. You realized something simple but irreversible. Patterns don't lie. Intentions can be debated. Words can be reinterpreted. But patterns reveal truth over time. The verdict wasn't dramatic. It was steady. You chose self-respect over familiarity. You chose long-term alignment over short-term comfort. And in doing that, something in you stabilized. The doubt quieted. The overthinking slowed. The need to justify your shift dissolved. You're operating from somewhere deeper now. Not from wounded pride. Not from impulse. From discernment. And discernment doesn't shout, it decides. It's over for all of them. Doesn't mean destruction. It means access revoked, not out of spite, not out of rage, but out of recognition. You finally understood that not everyone deserves continued entry into your thoughts, your explanations, your emotional labor. Some people had access to versions of you they never respected. That door is closed now. No more rehearsed arguments in your head while you're trying to sleep. No more imaginary conversations, where you try to finally say it perfectly so they'll understand. No more hoping that one day they'll wake up with the awareness you had to fight to earn. You stop trying to evolve people who are committed to staying the same. That's not bitterness. That's precision-controlled detachment. Isn't dramatic. It's quiet. It looks like shorter responses, slower availability, energy redirected inward instead of outward. You're no longer volunteering explanations to people who never offered accountability. The rarest form of dominance isn't intimidation. It's indifference rooted in understanding. You see them clearly. You just no longer feel compelled to engage beyond what's necessary. Not because you feel nothing, but because you feel enough to know your limits. This version of you is harder to access, not because you built walls out of fear, but because you built standards out of experience. And standards don't negotiate, they filter. Most people never reach this stage. They stay in the loop. Argument, reconciliation, disappointment, repeat. They look for closure in someone else's apology. They wait for validation to confirm what they already know. Their peace depends on another person's admission. You stepped out of the cycle. You stopped needing the confession. You stopped needing the dramatic reveal. You stopped rehearsing speeches designed to corner someone into understanding your pain. Instead, you gave yourself what they never could, internal closure. That's rare. You no longer feel the urge to win arguments. Winning requires participation, and participation requires emotional investment. You've withdrawn both. You don't need to expose anyone's character. Time does that without your help. You don't need to prove betrayal. Patterns already testified. Silence became strategy, not the silent treatment, not passive aggression, but composed restraint. You speak when necessary. You respond when it aligns. You disengage when it doesn't. There's no performance in it. No theatrics, just calibration. They will feel the distance before they understand the reason. And by the time they start analyzing your shift, you've already stabilized within it. This isn't a temporary elevation fueled by adrenaline. It's structural, built from repetition, reflection, and the quiet discipline of choosing yourself consistently. There's an inevitability to this version of you, not arrogance, not superiority, just alignment. You know what you tolerate. You know what you don't. You know the cost of ignoring your instincts, and you're no longer willing to pay it. That clarity changes your presence. You don't chase. You don't convince. You don't collapse your standards to keep temporary peace. You move once, and you mean it. At first, they don't take it seriously. They assume your quiet is temporary, that your distance is a tactic, that eventually you'll reach out, reopen the conversation, restore the old rhythm. But then time passes, and you don't. That's when it starts to register. When they notice you no longer react the way you used to. The provocations don't land. The subtle guilt doesn't pull you back in. The access they once had feels restricted. Not blocked with drama, just quietly reduced. Your energy doesn't bend toward them anymore. And that's when the shift becomes visible. They may test it, a comment, a reminder of shared history. And you respond, if you respond at all, selectively, measured, unmoved. They respond emotionally. You respond intentionally. The contrast is undeniable. But by the time they realize it's permanent, you've already detached internally. You're not fighting urges. You're not suppressing feelings. You've processed them, released them, filed them away. This isn't cruelty, it's filtration. You filtered out what no longer aligns. You filtered out dynamics that required you to shrink. You filtered out access that came without respect. Most people go back when faced with discomfort. They reopen doors because silence feels heavy. They confuse familiarity with connection. You didn't, and that's what makes this different. You're not waiting for them to understand. You've already moved forward without needing them to. Closing the file wasn't the end of your story. It was the end of your distraction. All the energy you once spent decoding mixed signals, managing emotional chaos, and rehearsing explanations is now available. Reclaimed, redirected. What used to drain you now fuels you. You're building quietly. Your mornings feel different. Your focus sharpens. The discipline you once struggled to maintain becomes easier because your mind isn't crowded with unresolved tension. You're evolving structurally, habits tightening, standards rising, tolerance lowering. You're less accessible, but more powerful, not because you're withholding yourself to create mystery, because you're investing yourself where there's return, growth, alignment, peace. Your attention is no longer scattered across people who mishandled it. It's concentrated. And concentration multiplies results. They may interpret your distance as coldness. They may assume you've hardened. What they won't see is the internal expansion happening behind the scenes. The recalibration, the refinement, the rebuilding of self-trust. This isn't your final form. It's just the version of you that stopped leaking energy. The closed file wasn't an act of destruction. It was resource reallocation. And now, everything you build carries the precision of someone who learned the cost of misplaced access and decided never to pay it again. The case file snapped shut, not theatrically, just a precise, deliberate close. And now the room is quiet. No final speech. No dramatic exit. No attempt to make them understand what they failed to see when it mattered. You don't announce your departure. You don't issue warnings. You don't threaten outcomes. You simply move differently. Your tone is steady. Your boundaries are implied. Your presence no longer leans toward places that once drained you. There's no bitterness in it. No obsession. Just adjustment. It's over for all of them. Was never about revenge. It was about resolution. It means your standards are no longer negotiable. It means access must now be earned, not assumed. It means the old dynamic, the one where you overextended, overexplained, overcompensated, is permanently closed. You're not trying to prove a point. You became one. There's a calm that comes with that kind of decision. A grounded stillness. You're no longer scanning the room for shifts in loyalty, no longer bracing for subtle disrespect, no longer negotiating with your own intuition. You trust yourself now, and that trust changes everything. They expected noise. They expected emotion. They expected you to come back around. You chose silence, and that's why they know it's real.